The time has come, so we would like to move on to the next speech. We have Minister Takuya Hirai of Digital Transformation and Information Technology Policy, and he will be talking about what the digital agency will be about. We would like to call upon Minister Hirai. How do you do? I am Minister in charge of Digital Transformation, Hirai. Previously, as Minister, I had been invited to AISUM to talk about our AI strategy. Last year, I left my position as Minister, and last year I said in my own words that in regard to my position, I thought that because of the relevant responsibilities of the ministers, that digitalization in Japan would not be successful, and that I thought that a horizontal, strong force had to be done in a centralized manner for digitalization, and so I talked about the necessity for such an organization to be established within the government. I think that it was in a press conference last year in September when I was to resign that I mentioned this, and then 1 year has passed and various policies have evolved, and this has led to the plans for the establishment of a digital agency, and I had not anticipated that 1 year later I would be assigned to be responsible for such a function. But I believe that it's going to be quite an interesting assignment. And so as I run, I have to think about what to do, and I have to make various decisions while running ahead. I cannot stop and pause, but must continue moving forward. That's the situation which I am in. And we are now in the AISUM Transum in CTEC 2020 conference, and I have been invited to speak here. Next year, we will be able to show you what the shape of the digital agency will be like. But in regard to the background for this and what needs to be done, I would like to briefly cover what is happening. In the Liberal Democratic Party, there was a special committee for the promotion of a digital society, and I had served as the head of that committee. And currently, this has become a promotion headquarters. And the kickoff meeting was held yesterday. The first meeting was held yesterday. And if I think about it, in the year 2000 and then in the year 2001, there was the basic law on IT that was enacted. And in regard to the chairman of the Research and Policy Council, Mr. Aso, there was a special committee for e-Japan that was formed. And this became the root for this effort now. 20 years have passed. For example, in 2013, there was the government CIO position that was established. And there was some horizontal functions that were described. And in 2014, I took the initiative in moving forward with the basic law on cybersecurity as an effort as a representative. And we looked at an organization called NISC, which was established to oversee the operations by digital matters by ministries and agencies. And I was then involved in the basic law. And in regard to open data utilization, there was the obligation to take advantage of open data. And in the prefectural level as well, there was talk about this. But in 2014, many people could not understand the aspects of data, even if we talked about it. But now we hear about the utilization of data everywhere. And so therefore, it seems that the world has changed greatly. In 2019, I was in charge of IT matters as minister, and in regard to a basic law on digital procedures, the digital first, once only, and connected first were the slogans that were described. But even if legislation was passed, things do not move immediately, and there were some cumbersome situations because of that. But we can no longer move forward at the speeds that we had taken in the past. It's necessary to change our mindsets. And this is because of the advent of COVID-19. As we face 2020, if we look back on this year, I think that this will prove to be a major turning point in history. And when I was the special chairman of the committee, I talked about the investments of digital matters in the infrastructure or IT policies and so on, but we had not been able to meet the expectations of the people of Japan. And we had to reflect upon this, and so therefore, this led to the Digital Nippon 2020 concept. And this is over 200 pages long as a document, but I believe that the contents describe truly what we are striving to achieve now. And in regard to the digital matters, what I felt was that compared to the United States or Europe or China, when it comes to optical fiber or the communication coverage of mobile phones, if we look at the infrastructure, then we see that it is not in any way inferior, because that was the goal of the IT Basic Law. We wanted to establish an infrastructure for info communication society. And despite the fact that that objective had been met, our performance was poor. This is because everything had been done on a half-baked basis. I can't find any other word to describe it. It was a half-baked effort. There were some portions that could be used, whereas others could not be utilized at all. And there were things that were not completely end-to-end digital, or digitalization should have been done after the procedures had been looked at, but then the procedures remained the same while we tried to digitalize. And we cited various objectives, but we have not been criticized for what we have been unable to achieve. However, because of the advent of COVID-19, things have changed dramatically. And when it comes to a solid policy in regard to the economy and to the public finance, it's going to be a very important aspect. But now, the word digital has come up 105 times. If we look at the 2006, then when we look at the policies, then it doesn't come at all. It comes up 3 times. And in 2019, it came up 53 times, whereas this year, in regard to the digital policy, it has appeared as a word 105 times. And this is the first time that the aspect of digital policy has come up to the forefront so strongly. That indicates the high degree of interest in this matter, and this has led to the instructions by the Prime Minister to establish a digital agency. And the word digital is very difficult to translate into Japanese, or it would be meaningless to translate it into Japanese, because I don't think there are too many people who can properly explain in Japanese what digital or analog means. And so when we talk about digitalization, various people have talked about this based upon their sensibilities and how they interpret this. But when we look at the situation of Japan up until now, the word digitalization was not understood in terms of a fundamental change of everything that had been taking place up until now, but it is necessary to do so from here onwards. The important point is transformation, and with Minister Kono, we are looking at reforms in the regulations, and also we're looking at the system for civil servants, and it's necessary to look at a fundamental review as we move forward. There's the matter of the hanko seals. This has been talked about, but we're not talking about anything radically different now. There used to be these seals and stamps, and is it really necessary to use this? If it's not really necessary, we can abandon such practices. That was the sentiment that started this process. And aside from that, in the area of education or medicine or disaster prevention, and there will be also matters involving the minister in charge of transportation. But at any rate, for what changes can be made before the digital agency is established, we should establish by when things have to take place. So every week, one or two matters are looked at to decide by when a commitment should be made to accomplish what. And this is done in a meeting attended by politicians. It's the 2+1 meetings. And to commit completely, we believe that it's no longer the bottom-up process as in the past. There may be some difficulties in this, but in regard to points that can be done by politicians, in the 2+1 process, we want to tackle such items which politicians are capable of accomplishing on their own. And as we move forward with digitalization, what we must not forget is that when it comes to digitalization, it's not the objective, but rather the means. It has to be human-centric, and it must satisfy the user. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to do something. So what we strive for is a digital society. And it's necessary to consider what kind of society it will be. In regard to the Japan Business Federation, or Keidanren's Society 5.0, we are sharing information, and I believe that we share the same image of what we must do. But for the general public, if we talk about Society 5.0, when they look at what will change around them, I don't think that anyone can really imagine what will take place. So the process of digitalization has to be made transparent, and at the same time, it's necessary to explain why this has to be carried out. We have to look at the basic law on IT and come up with a fundamental revision to the law to indicate this. And already a working group has started on this, and various discussions have started on this. And in regard to the IT basic law, when this was enacted, there were core members that were active, such as Professor Jun Murai of Keio University, and he will be serving as the chairman as well, because over the past 20 years, various changes have taken place. And if we look back at the past, we can look at the things that have to be done in the future. And by sharing that information, we can be on the same page as we move forward. Therefore, we have requested Professor Murai to serve in his current position, and active debate is taking place now under his initiative. An extreme case could be made that when we talk about this, it could be possible that we are trying to achieve a digitalized society where people don't have to be conscious about digital matters. We want to be able to achieve a very high quality of life. And what would that life be like? It has to be human-centric and very positive for humans. And in the working group members, we have Wakamiya-san, a programmer who is over 80 years old, and he has written about the significance of digital as an elderly citizen. So it has to be easy to use for senior citizens, and these are the aspects which he has thought about.
So if you look at the Japanese unique digital society, we should not leave anybody behind. Nobody should be left behind in terms of accessibility of equipment, UI and UX. There should not be gaps and disparities between users. It is important to emphasize this concept that nobody is left behind. Think of digitalization, Chinese pursuit, or the US that focus on GAFA, the giant companies. Neither of these concepts would not be fitting to Japan because we have different society goal that we need to strive for. We need to pay attention to privacy protection, but still use data effectively to make sure our digital society is human-centric and human-friendly. That's our challenge. The model that we are formulating is going to be useful to other countries where they are also eventually face the aging society, as we do in Japan as well. So different from China, US, or Europe, we have to have Japan's own digital society. We are one of the leading aging societies across the world. I think in that sense, it is important for us to be able to show the model to the world. In the eyes of elderlies and the handicapped people, we need to be careful about UI and UX. In developing the government system, conventionally, the usability, the ease of use was always the last thought. In other words, we have to make sure that the system is implemented perfectly, the information is managed fully. So for information providers, the system should be stable. And that was the goal. But we need to change that concept completely. We need to reverse it. So we need to look at the system in the eyes of citizens. It doesn't really matter whether the system is controlled and managed by a specific ministry. All that matters is what they need to do. Their name, address should be entered easily. So we really need to completely flip that idea 180 degrees. Of course, we have kept saying that we need to be human-centric all the time, but we were not really serious. As we try to establish our system going forward, we need to start with the touch points with citizens. It should be the system that is designed by citizens as well. It's a completely different idea, the concept. Interfaces that are not easy to use for elderlies, that is not good enough. It's the fault of the developers. As we are striving to establish a digital agency, this will have a symbolic meaning of political reform, and it will be a core of growth strategy of Japan. There are multiple themes that we need to discuss before we establish this agency. But the more we digitalize, the value of the analog space, there will be more value of the analog space. So how can we ensure comfortable space, analog space for people's livelihood? That is an important question. So again, we need to change the way we work. When it comes to the digital agency, up to before I came here, we had a regular meeting for digital agency. We presented the slogan, government as a startup. The final goal that we need to strive for is government as a service to make people happy. But from scratch, we need to establish a new agency within 1 year. This had never been done in Japan. This is unprecedented, a project in that way. We start from nothing, no people, no money, nothing. Usually, we set up a preparatory office, and we need to actually build this new agency within a year. And that is why we presented the idea of government as a startup. I keep telling the members of the preparatory office that they need to change. They need to change their mindset completely to be able to actually establish a new agency. And it's been a month from that basis, a completely different, renewed concept. We are going to set up the basic policy toward the end of this year, and in the mid-November, we need to finalize our budget, meaning that we know exactly the size of the agency. And by the end of next year, based on the basic policy, in a regular diet session next year, we will be able to present what sort of digital society we are going to build. Why do we need this digital agency? We should be able to clearly communicate that to citizens through the reform of IT basic law and the law of preserving and protecting personally identifiable data and privacy. When these legislations passed, this preparatory agency that actually is named digital reform legislation is going to be renamed to the preparatory office for digital agency. So from the very beginning, we may not be able to assign full resources to the agency because we are going to change the fundamental system completely. We need to find people who wholly support that idea, and they have to be the core people to move this project, to make sure the project is successful. It's not the extension of what we have done in the past. So people are extremely important. So how can we ensure suitable people? With that in mind, I am communicating with many people at this point in time. As a government, as we discussed in a meeting this morning, the government in Kasumigaseki need to be changed. The way government works should be changed. So for engineers, they should be able to start working remotely from the beginning. Of course, we have to have administration. We need a physical location, but it's not the building full of people working in person. It's not the people who put on business suits, black suits, and neckties. Should they come to the office in T-shirts and shorts? And flexibility, flex time systems should also be introduced. So that will be a completely different government organization that had never existed in the Japanese government, utilizing latest architecture. Of course, that's what we want to establish. And in terms of UI and UX, we need to have helps and corporations of young generation. Because we are in the time of coronavirus, COVID-19, since I'm leading this preparatory office, I need to listen to the opinions of others, but I also need to hear the voices of consumers, wide range of people. And that is why we established the idea box. I make sure that I read every one of the messages from junior high school students up to elderly people. They voice their expectations. Many of them are quite supportive. Mass media actually said that maybe it's not true, but it is true. They are supportive. There is enormous amount of expectation on the digital agency, expecting a positive reform due to the digital technologies, which we should never forget. The digital agency is a completely new agency. We are going to write the mission for this agency. The way it works, the final expected outcome will be completely different. It is different from any other agency that existed here. We had silo and the need of re-regulation, which are often talked about. It is as if different companies installing different systems in governmental offices, that we need to combine them together as one central piece to provide services, meaning that we need to give high authority to the agency. That too is completely different from conventional government organizations. It is going to start as a startup, as if it is a startup company. The authority over its budget and systems design and systems development. All of the authorities in these areas need to be transferred from other respective ministries and government organizations. It is a major change and transformation that is needed. Professor Jun Murai said in passing that it's now or never. This may be the only chance we have to transform. And that is why we are moving quickly at fast speed. It is really the right timing to build the digital agency. And the basis will be this system's architecture. This requires to be completely transformed. We were not confident enough to change that, the lowest basis, but we are going to change that architecture completely. There will be new human resources for digital agency, and when it comes to data, we have separate systems for registries, citizens registries. So data governance authority need to reside in the digital agency as well. I can keep talking about the digital agency, and I'll be welcoming any opinion from the citizens on this. But we are currently writing different policy, but there is the principal policy which should not be changed at all. We need to be citizen-centric system. We have to protect privacy and personal information. We have to have high security and enhanced data usage. And all of these principles should never change. But other than that, we should allow free, flexible changes. There is no binding rules for the change in the scope of digital agency. to achieve eventually the agile governance. Fundamental principles will stay the same, but everything else can be flexibly changed based on the opinions we hear. We should be flexible enough to be able to change our policy direction even. So that's the style of the agency, the digital agency. Of course, there is so much we need to discuss before we can build this, but this is demanded by this time. As you are here listening to me, I welcome your opinions. We do not know the right solution from the beginning. We need to find the right direction together with all of you and implement that idea. In charge of digital transformation, I will be always mindful of the process. I should be open to everyone, the process of making this digital agency. In my YouTube account, I am disclosing the discussion that takes place in the meeting, and I want to make sure that I have open discussion with citizens as well. Somebody who doesn't even show face does not design the system for digital agency. That will be the system that we are going to design together. It's a symbol of this time. And I welcome criticisms as well. Toward the end of this year, we will actually do our best and continue to do our best. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Minister Hirai, thank you very much.